This is an NBC News special report. The trial of Donald J. Trump. Here is Lester Holt.
Hello, everyone. It's just after noon in the East. We're coming on the air for live coverage of the United States Senate formally receiving articles of impeachment against President Donald J. Trump. The impeachment managers from the House now making the same walk they made yesterday with the articles of impeachment. The difference is today they will actually formally present them. They will actually read the two articles of impeachment before the U.S. Senate. Again, a moment of calm and dignity on a very serious matter. Let's go to Casey Hunt right now on Capitol Hill, who will lay out the day for us and where this goes.
Lester, this is a day of very solemn formality. This is all very carefully written down. As we have pointed out, this is only the third time in history that something like this has happened. The second time we've been able to watch it on TV. And there you can see the Senate Sergeant of Arms is leading this procession of those House managers. And what they're going to do here is formally read them to the Senate. The Senate will be accepting the articles here, and that's going to kick off the process that we're going to see play out the rest of the day. A rare, soon arrival of the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts. That's coming up at 2 o'clock this afternoon after this process has already unfolded. And at that point, the senators are going to be sworn in under a special oath that is reserved for these types of occasions. They obviously all take an oath when they take their offices. Initially, this one, of course, to render impartial justice. And that, of course, has been the question hanging over this Capitol building for the last weeks and months as this impeachment trial has unfolded. Members on both sides criticizing the other, raising questions about the ability to be fair. So today we're going to start to get some answers to some of the questions about how this trial may play out. A lot of those decisions made by the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who is under a lot of pressure at this point. This, of course, is going to continue, though, into next week as arguments begin in earnest. And, Lester, you can see they're waiting at the door of the United States Senate. We're going to lose sight of them here for a moment as they walk out onto the floor, and there's the Majority Leader.
And so 12 noon, the Senate will receive the managers of the House of Representatives to exhibit the articles of impeachment against Donald John Trump, President of the United States.
The hour of 12 noon having arrived and a quorum being present, the Sergeant-at-Arms will present the managers on the part of the House of Representatives.
Mr. President and members of the Senate, I announce the presence of the managers on the part of the House of Representatives to conduct proceedings on behalf of the House concerning the impeachment of Donald John Trump, President of the United States.
Managers on the part of the House will be received and escorted to the well of the Senate. Okay. The Sergeant-at-Arms will make the proclamation.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All persons are commanded to keep silent on pain of imprisonment while the House of Representatives is exhibiting to the Senate of the United States articles of impeachment against Donald John Trump, President of the United States.
The managers on the part of the House will now proceed.
Mr. President, the managers on the part of the House of Representatives are present and ready to present the articles of impeachment which have been preferred by the House of Representatives against Donald John Trump, President of the United States. The House adopted the following resolution, which, with the permission of the Senate, I will read. House Resolution 798, appointing and authorizing managers for the impeachment trial of Donald John Trump, President of the United States. Resolved that Mr. Schiff, Mr. Nadler, Ms. Lofgren, Mr. Jeffries, Ms. Demings, Mr. Crow, and Ms. Garcia of Texas are appointed managers to conduct the impeachment trial against Donald John Trump, President of the United States, that a message be sent to the Senate to inform the Senate of these appointments, and that the managers so appointed may, in connection with the preparation and conduct of the trial, exhibit articles of impeachment to the Senate and take all other actions necessary, which may include the following: employing legal, clerical, and other necessary assistance, and incurring such other expenses as may be necessary to be paid from amounts available to the Committee on the Judiciary under applicable expense resolutions or from the applicable account of the House of Representatives. Number 2, sending for persons and papers and filing with the Secretary of the Senate on the part of the House of Representatives any pleadings in conjunction with or subsequent to the exhibition of the articles of impeachment that the managers may consider necessary. With the permission of the Senate, I will now read the articles of impeachment, House Resolution 755. House Resolution 755, impeaching Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. Resolved that Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, and that the following articles of impeachment be exhibited to the United States Senate. Articles of impeachment exhibited by the House of Representatives of the United States of America in the name of itself and of the people of the United States of America against Donald John Trump, President of the United States of America, in maintenance and support of its impeachment against him for high crimes and misdemeanors. Article 1. Abuse of power. The Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment, and that the President shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. In his conduct of the office of the President of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional oath faithfully to execute the office of President of the United States, and to the best of his ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, Donald J. Trump has abused the powers of the presidency in that, using the powers of his high office, President Trump solicited the interference of a foreign government, Ukraine, in the 2020 United States presidential election. He did so through a scheme or course of conduct that included soliciting the government of Ukraine to publicly announce investigations that would benefit his reelection, harm the election prospects of a political opponent, and influence the 2020 United States presidential election to his advantage. President Trump also sought to pressure the government of Ukraine to take these steps by conditioning official United States government acts of significant value to Ukraine on its public announcement of the investigations. President Trump engaged in this scheme or course of conduct for corrupt purposes in pursuit of personal political benefit. In so doing, President Trump used the powers of the presidency in a manner that compromised the national security of the United States and undermined the integrity of the United States democratic process. He thus ignored and injured the interests of the nation. President Trump engaged in this scheme or course of conduct through the following means. Number 1, President Trump, acting both directly and through his agents within and outside the United States government, corruptly solicited the government of Ukraine to publicly announce investigations into A, political opponent, former Vice President Joseph R. Biden Jr., and B, a discredited theory promoted by Russia, alleging that Ukraine, rather than Russia, interfered in the 2016 United States presidential election. Number 2, with the same corrupt motives, President Trump, acting both directly and through his agents within and outside the United States government, conditioned 2 official acts on the public announcement that he had requested. A, the release of $91 million of United States taxpayer funds that Congress had appropriated on a bipartisan basis for the purpose of providing vital military and security assistance to Ukraine to oppose Russian aggression, and which President Trump had ordered suspended. And B, a head of state meeting at the White House, which the President of Ukraine sought to demonstrate continued United States support for the government of Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression. Number 3, faced with the public revelation of his actions, President Trump ultimately released the military and security assistance to the government of Ukraine, but has persisted in openly and corruptly urging and soliciting Ukraine to undertake investigations for his personal political benefit. These actions were consistent with President Trump's previous invitations of foreign interference in United States elections. In all of this, President Trump abused the powers of the presidency by ignoring and injuring national security and other vital national interests to obtain an improper personal political benefit. He has also betrayed the nation by abusing his high office to enlist a foreign power in corrupting democratic elections. Wherefore, President Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he will remain a threat to national security and the Constitution if allowed to remain in office, and has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law. President Trump thus warrants impeachment and trial, removal from office, and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. Article 2, obstruction of Congress. The Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment, and that the President shall be removed from office for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. In his conduct of the office of President of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional oath faithfully to execute the office of President of the United States, and to the best of his ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, Donald J. Trump has directed the unprecedented, categorical, and indiscriminate defiance of subpoenas issued by the House of Representatives pursuant to its sole power of impeachment. President Trump has abused the power of the presidency in a manner offensive to and subversive of the Constitution, in that the House of Representatives has engaged in an impeachment inquiry focused on President Trump's corrupt solicitation of the government of Ukraine to interfere in the 2020 United States presidential election. As part of this impeachment inquiry, the committees undertaking the investigation served subpoenas seeking documents and testimony deemed vital to the inquiry from various executive branch agencies and offices and current and former officials. In response, without lawful cause or excuse, President Trump directed executive branch agencies, offices, and officials not to comply with those subpoenas. President Trump thus interposed the powers of the presidency against the lawful subpoenas of the House of Representatives and assumed to himself functions and judgments necessary to exercise the sole power of impeachment vested by the Constitution in the House of Representatives. President Trump abused the powers of his high office through the following means. Number 1, directing the White House to defy a lawful subpoena by withholding the production of documents sought therein by the committees. Number 2, directing other executive branch agencies and offices to defy lawful subpoenas and withhold the production of documents and records from the committees, in response to which the Department of State, the Office of Management and Budget, Department of Energy, and Department of Defense refused to produce a single document or record. Directing current and former, number 3, directing current and former executive branch officials not to cooperate with the committees in response to which 9 administration officials defied subpoenas for testimony, namely John Michael Mick Mulvaney, Robert B. Blair, John A. Eisenberg, Michael Ellis, Preston Wells Griffith, Russell T. Vaught, Michael Duffy, Brian McCormick, and T. Ulrich Breckbull. These actions were consistent with President Trump's previous efforts to undermine United States government investigations into foreign interference in United States elections. Through these actions, President Trump sought to arrogate to himself the right to determine the propriety, scope, and nature of the impeachment inquiry into his own conduct, as well as the unilateral prerogative to deny any and all information to the House of Representatives in the exercise of its sole power of impeachment. In the history of the Republic, no president has ever ordered the complete defiance of an impeachment inquiry or sought to obstruct and impede so comprehensively the ability of the House of Representatives to investigate high crimes and misdemeanors. This abuse of office served to cover up the president's own repeated misconduct and to seize and control the power of impeachment, and thus to nullify a vital constitutional safeguard vested solely in the House of Representatives. In all of this, President Trump acted in a manner contrary to his trust as president and subversive of constitutional government, to the great prejudice of the cause of law and justice, and to the manifest injury of the people of the United States. Wherefore, President Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he will remain a threat to the Constitution if allowed to remain in office, and has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law. President Trump thus warrants impeachment and trial, removal from office, and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. Mr. President, that completes the exhibition of the articles of impeachment against Donald John Trump, President of the United States. The managers request that the Senate take order for the trial. The managers now request leave to withdraw.
Thank you, Mr. Schiff. The Senate will duly notify the House of Representatives when it is ready to proceed to trial.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
For the information of senators, pursuant to yesterday's order, at 2 o'clock today, the Senate will proceed to the consideration of the articles of impeachment. The Chief Justice of the United States will preside over the trial as required in Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6 of the United States Constitution. Also, under the previous order, the presiding officer has been authorized to appoint a committee of 4 senators, 2 upon the recommendation of the Majority Leader and 2 upon the recommendation of the Democratic leader, to escort the Chief Justice into the Senate chamber. I ask that the presiding officer do so now.
The chair, pursuant to Order January 15, 2020, on behalf of the Majority Leader and the Democratic leader, appoints Mr. Blunt of Missouri, Mr. Leahy of Vermont, Mr. Graham of South Carolina, and Mrs. Feinstein of California to escort the Chief Justice of the United States into the Senate chamber.
So for the further information of senators, there will be a live quorum call prior to the arrival of the Chief Justice at 2 p.m. today. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate stand in recess subject to the call of the chair.
Without objection, the Senate stands in recess subject to the call of the chair.
Very formal, very solemn. What you have seen is the House managers, essentially the prosecutors in this case, come back to the Senate, present the case formally, reading the 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump. They now retire back to the House side. what will happen in just a few hours, about an hour and a half from now. As you heard, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, will arrive on Capitol Hill, arrive at the Senate. He'll be sworn in as the presiding judge in the impeachment trial. Then the members of the Senate will themselves be sworn in. And Casey Hunt, correct me if I'm wrong, but at that point, the trial has technically begun.
That's right, Lester. Even though we're not going to see the arguments actually start to unfold until next week, this will become officially the first day of President Trump's impeachment trial. And as you point out, this is a very solemn oath that the senators are set to take later on this afternoon. They will take the oath together. It's, do you solemnly swear that in all things appertaining to the trial of the impeachment of Donald John Trump, President of the United States, now pending, you will do impartial justice according to the Constitution and laws, so help you God. So that is what all these senators are going to have to swear to later on this afternoon. They're then going to be called in small groups to the front of the Senate to sign one at a time that they are attesting to that oath. It's an unusual procedure that unfolds here in the United States Senate, as all of this is. And you know, the weightiness, I think, of this occasion is clearly wearing on everyone in this building, as we've seen them coming and going. Even this morning, we're actually in a place in the Capitol where normally we wouldn't be allowed to be broadcasting from, because they've created special rules, and you may in fact see some senators come down these stairs behind me. But again, just a pause here as we continue on this momentous day, Lester.
Casey Hunt, thank you very much. And as this unfolds, we still don't know exactly what the trial will look like. We do know that the pressure is building to allow witnesses and documents, specifically on revelations of the last few days involving Lev Parnas. He's an associate of Rudy Giuliani, allegedly involved in the pressure campaign on Ukraine to launch those politically advantageous investigations that the president had wished for. I want to play a little of what Lev Parnas said on MSNBC last night.
President Trump knew exactly what was going on. He was aware of all my movements. I wouldn't do anything without the consent of Rudy Giuliani or the president. I have no intent, I have no reason to speak to any of these officials. I mean, they have no reason to speak to me.
There is that, Hallie Jackson, and also the bit of news today from the Government Accountability Office. Walk us through all that.
Yeah, there's a lot, Lester. And let me start with the Lev Parnas interview that you just played. The White House now casting questions on the credibility of Parnas, pointing out that he has been indicted on campaign finance charges and pushing back on his comments that the president was aware of what was happening or had a role in this, et cetera, as Parnas explains. Still, you have Democrats now, and I spoke with one Democratic senator this morning who said there should be discussions about whether they hear from Parnas as a witness potentially in the Senate impeachment trial that, as you note, is set to begin just hours from now. On the Government Accountability Office report, this is something that has just developed today. The GAO, as it's called, is a nonpartisan branch, essentially, independent working piece of the legislative branch that audits, basically, federal government entities. They now are saying that President Trump's administration broke the law, violated the law by putting in place that aid freeze on money that was meant for Ukraine that Congress had passed. This, of course, Lester, is at the center of this impeachment question, whether President Trump, as Democrats allege, abused his power by withholding this aid in exchange for investigations into his political rivals. The GAO, this office, makes the point when they make this determination that the president doesn't get to pick what he wants to do over what Congress has enacted into law. I was speaking with an official from the Office of Management and Budget this morning who says they disagree with this ruling. A senior administration official says this is an example of overreach by that entity, but it is ammunition now that you are seeing Democrats already use that they say helps bolster their impeachment case here, Lester.
All right, Hallie, thank you. And NBC News legal analyst Carol Lamb is a former federal prosecutor and joins us here. In that government accountability finding, they noted the president did it for policy priorities, policy reasons, not using the word political. So does that take some of the oomph out of this?
It may take a little of the sting out of it, but it doesn't affect their conclusion, which is that this was an illegal, unauthorized act by the president. And that's something the White House is really going to have to deal with, because the Government Accountability Office does not answer to the White House, unlike the Office of Management and Budget, which is an executive agency. So there's going to be a lot of parsing of the words in that government accountability report.
But it does make the point that this was clearly not normal. And
not
clearly
normal and clearly
not legal.
Not legal.
All right. We have standing by former Senator Kent Conrad, Democrat of North Dakota, who's been through all this before during the impeachment trial of President Clinton. Senator, I wonder what your thoughts were as you saw that solemn walk of the copies of the articles, the reading before the Senate.
You know, it reminded me of how somber and sober and serious it all is. I go back to those days, of course that's 20 years ago, and I remember so well the sense of the importance of it all, and that it's a weighty moment. And this was a chance to be on the stage of history, and every senator is going to perform on that stage, and what they do is going to be remembered. It's going to be recorded, and it's important. This has only happened 3 times in our history that a president has been impeached. Let
me pick up on that thought, though, this weight of history. Did you feel it at that moment that your vote, however this was going to go, was going to be remembered and part of your legacy?
Yes, absolutely. I think every member felt that weight, that this is serious, serious business. Because after all, if a president is convicted in the Senate, they are removed from office and never permitted to hold office again. And so you are overturning the results of a vote of the American people. Now, in this case, of course, the president won not by getting the most votes. Hillary Clinton got the most votes, but he won in the Electoral College, which made him President of the United States. So this is serious, serious business, and I think every member feels it.
Senator Conrad, thank you so much for coming on with us. I want to turn to Andrea Mitchell in our Washington bureau. Andrea, in just about an hour and a half from now, those senators will raise their hands and they will pledge impartiality. We have heard from both sides of this who have made very clear their positions. How odd a moment might that be?
A very odd moment, especially because the Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has made it very clear he is not impartial, as have many of his colleagues, the strong defenders of the president. And even since that Lev Parnas interview with Rachel Maddow last night, there have been comments by some of the so-called moderate Republicans who the Democrats were counting on to be among the 4 that might vote to create a 51-member majority to bring in witnesses. There have been comments from Susan Collins, for instance, saying, well, why is the House now bringing in new information? It's after the articles were published, questioning the timing, whether they rushed to judgment. So a lot of questions already being raised by the president and his defenders about whether some of this new information can even be evidence. We have questions that need to be resolved as to whether it can at least be included in the opening arguments. I suspect it will be able to, but only the documents that were finished and turned over to the House Intelligence Committee, and Lev Parnas told Rachel Maddow that, in fact, that was the rush to get it in on time, to get it into the articles before that resolution was approved. That can be included, but there are still a lot of questions as to whether video can be shown, as it was when the Monica Lewinsky depositions were shown, those witnesses. And it's really striking when we go back and look at the Tom Daschle, Trent Lott counterparts, the Majority Leader Tom Daschle, a Democrat then, going against, of course, his own Democratic president, Bill Clinton, in 1999, Trent Lott, the Republican. The 2 of them held a news conference joking around and saying, we're going to work this out on the witnesses before the trial begins. They were working out agreements. There was a lot of partisanship, obviously, in the House side and even in the Senate. But they worked it all out, the leaders together, and came up with a unanimous agreement on how to proceed with witnesses. There were 3 witnesses. They were deposed. That was videoed. The video was played. So those are the issues that still have to be resolved as we go into this trial.
Yeah, Andrea. And Supreme Court Justice John Roberts, as we know, will be sworn in this afternoon to preside over the trial of the president. Pete Williams has more on his role. And Pete, I'm also curious, do we have any insight into how he feels about being in this position?
Well, he hasn't said anything about it. We aren't even allowed to talk to the people who advised Rehnquist. They won't talk to us when the Chief Justice presided over the Clinton trial. But talking to some people around him, it's pretty clear that he views this, A, as his solemn duty. The Constitution requires the Chief Justice to preside over a Senate impeachment trial. But also, it's, it's a huge vacuum up of his time at the time when the Supreme Court is also working across the street. This will be an enormous imposition on the Chief Justice's time, and that's something that they don't really welcome. But, they're going to step up to their historical duty and the requirements here. So, on the other hand, though, his authority is quite limited. Anything he rules on is immediately subject to a vote of the full Senate, and he well realizes that he's more like a traffic cop here or a master of ceremonies than he is like a trial judge.
Yeah, that's right. You said that yesterday, and I shake my head each time. It is an interesting way to look at it. This is not a typical trial. Pete Williams, thank you. That concludes our coverage for now. We'll be back on the air about 2 o'clock Eastern time with live coverage of Senate proceedings in the impeachment trial of President Trump. Chief Justice Roberts, the senators themselves will be sworn in. The senators taking an oath to, quote, do impartial justice under the Constitution and laws, so help me God. Until then, for all of us at NBC News, I'm Lester Holt in New York. Good day.